Grateful to be joined now by Dr. Kevin O'Kane, the BMA's London Regional Council Chairman. Thank you very much for coming in and joining us. Doctors earning, surgeons earning £128,000 a year. Well, is strike action really the right course of
First of all, thank you for your very warm welcome there, Jacob.
I take issue with... have a spokesman on who will give a firm argument.
Absolutely. I'd have to take issue with a lot of your figures and with a number of your premises. Firstly, we're not looking for a pay rise, we're looking for pay restoration. Doctors' salaries are down typically for consultants 35% over the past 14 years. Now, that's in the background of average earnings going up over that period by about 48%, banking and finance 78%.
But you're taking two very different things. First of all, you're using RPI from 2010, and you've decided to take a high point of earnings to the current point, and then you're comparing the difference between earnings and RPI with what other people have seen in rises. You're not comparing the difference with other people's wage changes on an RPI basis. If you want to take
CPI, we're still talking about significant loss. And what we're looking for is pay restoration. For instance, do you consider it fair that a junior doctor who spent at least 5 years at university has accrued £100,000 typical student interest loan debt, starts work at £14 per hour while paying back that loan?
But they get average earnings that are much higher than everybody else 1 year after graduating and 10 years after graduating. Well, that premium
they're not like everybody else. We used to have an independent peer review body. It's lost its independence, as you know. The members are appointed by the government produces recommendations and sets caps.
And the government has accepted the recommendation of the peer review body.
Well, the government rigged the peer review body. One of your own MPs last week...
Everyone else has accepted the peer review body.
Well, everyone else has signed up for a 5% pay cut if you take a 6% pay rise at the moment. But one of your own Conservative MPs just last week said that the peer review body was rigged, so you can't really maintain that one.
I think the peer review bodies were a very good way of dealing with this because they help us get away from the strike action that we had in the 70s and the 80s, and that has led to other people, almost everybody else now, accepting the peer review recommendations, that it's been accepted by the nurses, been accepted by the police, been accepted by the teachers. The surgeons are a standout, aren't they?
The surgeons, the doctors, consultants. The peer review bodies are interesting, aren't they? Some of them have maintained their independence, such as the parliamentary one. The doctors' one was established in 1960, and as you know, it's specifically to stop the type of situation we're in just now, where doctors' salaries would be pegged by government to expenditure and to inflation, and to avoid us taking strikes. But I'm going to come back to something else you said there. You said that appointments, I can't remember your phrase quite, but it was 250,000 appointments cancelled or disrupted by doctors' strikes. It's hard to get that figures, but we've got 7.5 million people on the waiting list.
So
the waiting lists are up.
The waiting
lists are up 4.3 million pounds in the past. 4.3 million people in the past 14 years. Now that's due to systemic underfunding of the NHS. We have fewer consultants, hospital beds, and scanners than any comparable Western country.
It has received billions and has got more and more funding, got extra funding.
It's not in real terms. Health inflation is so much higher than ordinary inflation.
Well, the government has provided since 2010 real terms increase against inflation for the health service, and because of COVID there was then extra money provided as well, plus actually the £350 million a week that Theresa May put in after we left the European Union, and the promise on the side
we
of
really do need to account for a lot of that money that came in during COVID, but that's a different story. Come back to... You're very keen on the economy, you're very keen on market forces. There are market forces for doctors at the moment. I can double my salary by going to Ireland or going to Australia. But you're losing doctors. You have 8,000 NHS vacancies, and your government cannot deliver any of its targets without us.
But Ireland is the most brilliant special pleading, because yes, Ireland is higher, and Luxembourg's higher than Ireland, but the UK is higher than Belgium, Finland, Norway, Sweden, France, Italy, Spain, etc. This is the OECD figures. Now,
I'm looking at the top end of that chart you have in front of you. You've chosen an interesting point to start reading.
I'm going to put to you that you are using very special pleading on the figures. First of all, this issue I mentioned to you of RPI, that you've taken RPI to come up with this figure of a decline when everybody else is using CPI, and you take 2010, which is a high point, and then you take this comparison with Ireland, which is one of the outliers in Europe, along with Luxembourg in pay. So this is taking... it is the lies, damned lies and statistics approach, isn't it? Very selective use of statistics.
Well, doctors are leaving in droves. We have 8,000 vacancies. 50% of the 2020 class of medical graduates are no longer licensed to practice in this country. I'm not sure how you intend to run your NHS without us.
Because you have turnover in all employments, and that actually
50% of doctors have left in 1 year from a graduating class. That's a very, very
NHS employment
blithe way of looking at it.
Turnover is about 7%. And that would imply about 15 years average service in the NHS. 15 years service is not an unreasonable length of time.
Sorry, explain this 15-year service. Most graduates actually spend their entire careers there. I've been in the NHS for 37 years, and that is typical.
This is for the NHS as a whole.
We're talking about doctors today, not the NHS as a whole. Doctors typically spend their entire career in the NHS. We're tied to a monopoly employer, and that is our problem.
You will. I agree with that, but that would encourage you to have more private activity within the health service.
Only 30% of doctors do private activity. I don't do any personally. I have no intention of. It's a hell of an expensive way to run a health service.
If you're complaining about a monopoly employer, the only way to get away from that is to have diversity of employers.
This is true, but some of us are actually devoted to a publicly funded, publicly provided NHS. I don't see either of the main parties actually making that commitment.
Funded.
And publicly provided is the most cost-efficient way of doing it.
Are you suggesting moving away from national pay bargaining?
We don't have national pay bargaining. We actually have peer review body who makes recommendations. It used to be an independent one, and we're asking the Prime Minister to give us an independent peer review body again and bring himself back to the table to get rid of these strikes.
But it is a national pay scale. So you would like to move to a non-monopoly employer?
I've not suggested that. The thought processes here are all over the place. Well, we're suggesting two things to the Prime Minister. Number one, he needs to come to us with a real offer. He needs to come to us and talk about refounding an independent DDRB, come to the table and avoid the strikes. The message to the Prime Minister is we don't want to be in strike today. It's his making. He's blocking talks.
This is completely bogus to say you don't want to be on strike when you've gone on strike. You have free will. You don't have to go on strike.
Isn't free will wonderful? We could have a nice theological conversation about that one, but I don't think it'll take us any further in Westminster.
But you have decided to go on strike. To blame it on other people is not serious. You have made this choice to go on strike, to represent people who are going on strike, because they're not satisfied with the pay review body that almost everybody else is.
We're not satisfied with 14 years of pay cuts. We've done everything in our power to avoid strikes. We wrote to Steve Barclay 2 days ago saying, come and speak to us. He hasn't done that. He has had one meeting with the Secretary of State, has one meeting with doctors in 7 months. The Prime Minister is a roadblock personally to having talks. We can't go on like this. Doctors are not doing this as some sort of capricious free will trip. This is something we're taking.
They're paid an average of £128,000 a year.
Come on now.
And they are now saying they're withdrawing their labour as if they're on the breadline. This is surely not serious. And it's leaving patients in pain.
But come on, I can't believe that you're using this type of moral blackmail here. Now, are you personally in a position where you can talk austerity to public sector workers?
The public sector workers can only be paid what the taxpayer can fund. There is limited.
No. The government decides how. No, the government decides how will it spend the money. Now, if you decide that you want to avoid.
Okay, so where are you taking this money from?
We're taking this money from general taxation, and we have different types of taxation.
You're
deciding not to tax utility companies. You're deciding not to tax multinationals, but you're happy to tax public sector workers.
We are more highly taxed than we have been in 70 years.
Well, we've had a Conservative government for 14 years. The taxes have gone through the roof.
I'm not proud of this.
But it's your track record, so don't blame doctors for your own tax record.
Where is this extra money coming from?
It's up to you to decide how you balance the books. It's not up to me to tell you how to fund your health service.
You balance the books by saying that people paid £128,000 a year are doing pretty well.
Well, I could say that MPs pay £84,000 a year are doing pretty well. But how many of you second jobs?
Not actually very many. I do, but actually not very many MPs have second jobs.
Quite a number of MPs.
Quite a lot of surgeons have second jobs.
I'm sorry, that's not correct. Roughly 30% of doctors do any private work. They don't earn £802 an hour presenting television programmes. A junior doctor's on £14 per hour. You cannot talk austerity to doctors.
You will find that some surgeons earn a great deal. You'll find some MPs have second jobs too.
Many MPs have second jobs.
Not many, actually. Most are dependent on their MP's salary. But they're still paid less than surgeons, which is fine. I'm not arguing for more pay for members of Parliament. It's a question of people on £128,000.
People are not on
leaving their patients in pain.
£128,000. Let's
How
parse
does
that
this-
figure.
how
Your
does
figure
this
is wrong.
meet your Hippocratic oath?
Well, Hippocratic oath is something else we need to talk about. You're a bit out of date in that one. But going back to the doctor's salaries, it's 90.
You don't want to talk about
it's
Hippocratic oath.
96 to roughly 120-something thousand. To get to 120-odd thousand, you will have been a doctor you'll been in training for approximately 30-odd years, working for more than 15
This is an
of them.
average. 128,000 is an average.
I'm 37 years a doctor. My hourly pay is £48. Have you ever tried calling out a plumber?
Well,
Let alone a television presenter.
It's completely different.
But what would you like doctors to be compared to? The point of the review body was to compare us.
You're paying the firm that employs the plumber. You're not paying the plumber.
When we had a review body put in place, it was to compare us to like professionals, to finance sector, to accountants, to lawyers. We have fallen behind.
You are some of the best paid people in the country, and you're leaving patients in pain.
We're not leaving patients in pain. Now, come on, that's not true, Jacob, and you know that very well. That's not true.
We've had
that's
so
not
many
true.
people interviewed
7.5 million on a waiting list under your
operations.
government, and you're trying to blame this, as the Prime Minister didn't want us to.
10%
You're blaming
increase.
it on doctors.
I'm blaming part of it on doctors, but sadly, we've got to end there. But thank you,
I'd love to
Dr.
see you again.
Kane. Very grateful that you came in.